Imagine a city rising from the marshy banks of the Tiber River. A city destined to become the heart of an empire that would stretch from the misty highlands of Scotland to the scorching deserts of Arabia. A city founded not by kings or conquerors, but by two brothers, nursed by a she-wolf and steeped in myth and legend. This is Rome, a name that echoes through the corridors of time, evoking images of gladiators, emperors, and legions, marching under the golden eagle. But Rome was more than just a city. It was an idea, a dream of order and power that would shape the world for centuries to come. Picture this. It's the 8th century BC, and the Italian peninsula is a patchwork of warring tribes and fledgling city-states. In the midst of this chaos, a small settlement begins to take root on the Palatine Hill. Its people are simple farmers and shepherds, but they are also fiercely ambitious. They drain the marshes, build walls, and forge alliances with their neighbors. Slowly, steadily, they begin to rise. But this is no ordinary rise. It's the beginning of a story that will span over 1,000 years, a story of triumph and tragedy, of glory and ruin. How did this humble settlement, born of myth and mud, grow to dominate the known world? How did it create a system of laws, governance, and culture that would influence civilizations for millennia? And how did it fall, leaving behind a legacy that still shapes our lives today? This is the story of the Roman Empire, a tale of ambition, power, and the relentless march of history. It's a story that begins with a she-wolf and ends with an empire that changed the world forever. Our story begins in the 8th century BC, in a land of rolling hills and fertile plains known as Latium. According to legend, Rome was founded in 753 BC by Romulus, a figure as enigmatic as the city he created. Romulus and his twin brother Remus were said to be the sons of Mars, the god of war, and Rhea Silvia, a Vestal virgin. Their birth was a scandal, their survival a miracle. Abandoned as infants and left to die on the banks of the Tiber River, the twins were saved by a she-wolf who nursed them back to health. Later, they were found by a shepherd, Faustulus, who raised them as his own. As adults, the brothers decided to found a city on the spot where they had been saved. But ambition and rivalry tore them apart. In a fit of rage, Romulus killed Remus, becoming the sole founder of Rome. It's a dramatic tale, filled with divine intervention, sibling rivalry, and the raw struggle for power. But how much of it is true? Archaeology tells a different, though no less fascinating story. The earliest settlements on the Palatine Hill date back to around 1000 BC, long before Romulus supposedly drew the first boundaries of the city. These early Romans were a hardy people, farmers and shepherds who lived in simple huts and worshipped gods of the earth and sky. The Palatine Hill, one of the 7 hills of Rome, was a natural fortress, offering protection from invaders and a vantage point over the surrounding plains. Over time, these small villages began to merge, forming a larger community. By the 8th century BC, this community had grown into a bustling city-state, complete with temples, markets, and a rudimentary system of governance. But why did the Romans cling to the legend of Romulus and Remus? Perhaps because it encapsulated their identity, a people born of struggle, destined for greatness, and unafraid to spill blood to achieve their goals. The story of the she-wolf, the abandoned twins, and the founding of Rome was more than just a myth. It was a symbol of resilience and ambition. It told the world that Rome was no ordinary city. It was a city with a divine purpose, a city that would rise above its humble beginnings to become the center of the world. Yet, the reality of Rome's early days was far from glamorous. The city was surrounded by powerful neighbors: the Etruscans to the north, the Sabines to the east, and the Latins to the south. Survival meant constant warfare, alliances, and betrayals. The early Romans were not just builders and farmers, they were warriors, driven by a relentless desire to expand their territory. By the 6th century BC, Rome had grown into a formidable city-state, ruled by a series of kings who expanded its territory, built its first temples, and laid the foundations for its future greatness. But this was just the beginning. The story of Rome was about to take a dramatic turn as the city transitioned from a monarchy to a republic, a system of government that would change the course of history. In 509 BC, the Romans did something extraordinary, something that would echo through the ages as a defining moment in the history of governance. They overthrew their last king, Tarquin the Proud, a tyrant whose cruelty and arrogance had alienated both the aristocracy and the common people. But this was no ordinary revolution. It wasn't just about replacing one ruler with another. It was about redefining power itself. The Romans declared that never again would they be ruled by a king. Instead, they established a res publica, a public matter, or republic, where power would reside not in the hands of a single ruler, but in the hands of the people, or at least in the hands of those who could claim to represent them. The Roman Republic was a bold experiment in governance, a system designed to balance the interests of the many against the ambitions of the few. At its heart was the Senate, a body of aristocrats who advised the state's leaders and shaped its policies. These senators were drawn from Rome's patrician class, the wealthy elite who traced their lineage back to the city's founding families. But the real power lay with the people, or rather, with the assemblies, where Roman citizens could vote on laws, elect officials, and declare war. It was a system built on compromise and competition, where no single individual or group could dominate for long. Yet, the Republic was far from perfect. From its very inception, it was marked by tension and conflict. The patricians, the wealthy aristocrats, held most of the political power, while the plebeians, the common people, struggled for a voice. The plebeians were the backbone of Rome, the farmers, soldiers, and laborers who kept the city running. But they had little say in how it was governed. This imbalance led to a series of clashes known as the conflict of the orders, a centuries-long struggle between the patricians and plebeians over land, debt, and political representation. One of the most dramatic moments in this struggle came in 494 BC, when the plebeians, fed up with their lack of rights, staged a mass walkout from the city. They withdrew to the Sacred Mount, a hill outside Rome, and refused to return until their demands were met. The patricians, faced with the prospect of a city without workers or soldiers, had no choice but to negotiate. The result was the creation of the tribunes of the plebs, officials elected by the plebeians to protect their interests. The tribunes had the power to veto laws and even halt government actions that harmed the common people. It was a major victory for the plebeians, but the struggle was far from over. Over time, the Republic evolved, slowly becoming more inclusive, at least in theory. Laws were passed to limit the power of the patricians and protect the rights of the plebeians. The 12 Tables, Rome's first written legal code, were established in 451 BC, providing a foundation for justice and equality under the law. Yet for all its progress, the Republic remained a system dominated by the elite. Wealth and power were concentrated in the hands of a few, while the majority of Romans, slaves, women, and non-citizens were excluded entirely. But the Republic's greatest strength was also its greatest weakness, its ability to adapt and expand. Rome was a warrior state, and its legions were soon marching across Italy, conquering city after city. By the 3rd century BC, Rome controlled the entire Italian peninsula, not through sheer force alone, but through a combination of military might, strategic alliances, and a willingness to extend citizenship to conquered peoples. This policy of assimilation was revolutionary. Unlike other empires which sought to dominate and exploit their subjects, Rome offered its conquered peoples a stake in its success. It was a recipe for stability and growth, but it also sowed the seeds of future conflict. The Republic was a time of great achievement, but it was also a time of constant struggle. It was a system built on the ideals of liberty, equality, and the rule of law. But it was also a system rife with inequality, corruption, and ambition. And as Rome grew richer and more powerful, the pressures on its fragile democracy would only increase. The Republic was a marvel of its time, but it was also a ticking time bomb, one that would eventually explode, reshaping Rome and the world forever. By the 3rd century BC, Rome was no longer just a city-state. It was a rising power, dominating the Italian peninsula and eyeing the wider Mediterranean world. But Rome was not alone in its ambitions. Across the sea in North Africa lay Carthage, a wealthy and powerful city-state that controlled much of the western Mediterranean. Carthage was a maritime empire built on trade, naval supremacy, and a network of colonies stretching from Spain to Sicily. It was Rome's equal in wealth, power, and ambition, and the two powers were destined to collide. The conflict between Rome and Carthage would play out in a series of 3 wars known as the Punic Wars, named after the Latin word for Carthaginians, punici. These wars were not just battles for territory, they were struggles for survival, for dominance, and for the future of the Mediterranean world. They were wars of innovation, strategy, and sheer willpower, fought on land and sea, and they would leave an indelible mark on history. The First Punic War, 264 to 241 BC, began over Sicily, a fertile and strategically vital island that lay between Rome and Carthage. Both powers saw Sicily as the key to controlling the Mediterranean, and when a local conflict erupted in the city of Messana, Rome and Carthage were drawn into the fray. What started as a small-scale intervention quickly escalated into a full-blown war. Rome, a land-based power with little experience in naval warfare, faced a daunting challenge. Carthage's navy was the most powerful in the Mediterranean. But the Romans were nothing if not resourceful. They built a fleet from scratch, using a captured Carthaginian ship as a model. To counter Carthage's superior seamanship, they invented the corvus, a boarding device that allowed Roman soldiers to turn naval battles into land battles. It was a bold and ingenious solution, and it worked. In 241 BC, after 23 years of brutal fighting, Rome emerged victorious. Carthage was forced to abandon Sicily and pay a massive indemnity. But this was not the end. It was only the beginning. The Second Punic War, 218 to 201 BC, is perhaps the most famous of the three, thanks to one man, Hannibal Barca, the brilliant Carthaginian general who would become one of history's greatest military minds. Hannibal was only 29 years old when he took command of Carthage's forces in Spain, but he had a bold and audacious plan. Instead of waiting for Rome to attack, he would take the fight to Italy itself. In 218 BC, Hannibal did the unthinkable. He led an army of 40,000 men, 9,000 cavalry, and 37 war elephants across the Alps, a feat that remains one of the most daring military maneuvers in history. The journey was grueling. The freezing cold, treacherous terrain, and attacks by local tribes decimated his forces. But Hannibal emerged in northern Italy with an army that struck fear into the hearts of the Romans. For 15 years, Hannibal rampaged across Italy, winning battle after battle. At Cannae, in 216 BC, he achieved one of the most stunning victories in military history, encircling and annihilating a Roman army twice the size of his own. Tens of thousands of Romans were killed in a single day, and the city of Rome itself seemed within his grasp. But Hannibal had a problem. He lacked the siege equipment and reinforcements needed to take Rome. Meanwhile, the Romans adopted a strategy of attrition, avoiding direct confrontation and wearing Hannibal down. The tide turned when Rome found its own brilliant general, Scipio Africanus. Scipio took the fight to Carthage, invading North Africa and forcing Hannibal to return home to defend his city. In 202 BC, at the Battle of Zama, Scipio defeated Hannibal in a decisive confrontation. Carthage was forced to surrender, ceding its empire and becoming a shadow of its former self. Rome was now the dominant power in the Western Mediterranean. The Third Punic War, 149 to 146 BC, was less a war and more a formality. By this time, Carthage was no longer a threat, but Rome's hatred for its old rival had not faded. The Roman senator Cato the Elder famously ended every speech with the words, "Carthago delenda est." Carthage must be destroyed. And so it was. In 149 BC, Rome found a pretext to declare war. Carthage, though weakened, resisted fiercely, but it was no match for Rome's legions. After a 3-year siege, the city fell in 146 BC. The Romans razed Carthage to the ground, slaughtering its inhabitants, enslaving its survivors, and sowing its fields with salt so that nothing would ever grow there again. It was an act of utter destruction, a brutal end to a once great civilization. The Punic Wars transformed Rome. They turned a regional power into a Mediterranean superpower with control over vast territories and resources. But they also changed Rome in less tangible ways. The wars exposed the Republic's strengths and weaknesses, its capacity for innovation, and its appetite for destruction. They introduced Rome to the wider world, but they also sowed the seeds of future conflicts. The Punic Wars were more than just a clash of empires. They were a clash of cultures, ideologies, and ways of life. They pitted Rome's disciplined legions against Carthage's naval prowess, Rome's republican ideals against Carthage's mercantile empire. And in the end, they left Rome victorious, but at a cost. The Republic had survived its greatest challenge, but it would soon face an even greater one: itself. By the 1st century BC, the Roman Republic was in crisis. The system that had once balanced the interests of the Senate, the people, and the state was buckling under the weight of its own success. Rome's vast empire had brought wealth and power, but it had also created deep inequalities. The Senate, dominated by a handful of aristocratic families, was increasingly seen as corrupt and out of touch. Meanwhile, the common people, the plebeians, were struggling with poverty, landlessness, and the fallout from decades of war. Into this volatile mix stepped 3 men whose ambitions would tear the Republic apart: Julius Caesar, Pompey the Great, and Marcus Licinius Crassus. In 60 BC, Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus formed an informal alliance known as the First Triumvirate. It was not an official institution, but rather a private agreement among 3 of Rome's most powerful men. Each had something the others needed. Pompey, a brilliant general, had the loyalty of the legions and the prestige of his military victories. Crassus, the richest man in Rome, had the money to fund their ambitions. And Caesar, a charismatic politician and rising star, had the political cunning to navigate the treacherous waters of Roman politics. Together, they dominated the Republic, bypassing the Senate and pushing through laws that served their interests. Caesar was elected consul in 59 BC, and he used his position to secure a military command in Gaul, modern-day France. Over the next decade, Caesar waged a series of campaigns that would make him a legend. His conquest of Gaul was a masterpiece of strategy and brutality, and it brought him immense wealth, fame, and the loyalty of his soldiers, but it also made him a threat. By 50 BC, the triumvirate was unraveling. Crassus had died in a disastrous campaign against the Parthians in 53 BC, leaving Caesar and Pompey as the 2 most powerful men in Rome. The Senate, fearful of Caesar's growing power, demanded that he disband his army and return to Rome as a private citizen. Caesar knew that to do so would leave him vulnerable to his enemies. Instead, he made a fateful decision. In January 49 BC, Caesar crossed the Rubicon River, the boundary between his province and Italy, with his army. It was an act of treason, a direct challenge to the Senate and to Pompey, who had aligned himself with the conservative faction. Caesar's famous words, "Alea iacta est," the die is cast. This marked the beginning of a civil war that would engulf the Republic. The war between Caesar and Pompey was a clash of titans. Pompey, the seasoned general, had the support of the Senate and the resources of the eastern provinces. Caesar, the daring innovator, had the loyalty of his battle-hardened legions. The conflict played out across the Mediterranean, from the hills of Italy to the deserts of Egypt. At the Battle of Pharsalus in 48 BC, Caesar achieved a decisive victory. Pompey fled to Egypt, where he was betrayed and assassinated by agents of the young pharaoh, Ptolemy XIII. Caesar, pursuing his rival, arrived in Egypt to find Pompey's head, presented to him as a gift. It was a grim reminder of the stakes of power. But Caesar's victory was not the end of the war. Pompey's supporters, known as the Optimates, continued to resist, and Caesar spent the next few years mopping up resistance in Africa, Spain, and the Middle East. By 45 BC, he was the undisputed master of Rome. Caesar returned to Rome as a dictator, a title he held not as a tyrant, but as a reformer. He implemented sweeping changes from land redistribution to calendar reform, and he planned even more. But his power and ambition alienated many in the Senate, who saw him as a threat to the Republic. On March 15th, 44 BC, the Ides of March, Caesar was assassinated by a group of senators led by Brutus and Cassius. They believed they were saving the Republic, but in reality, they were sealing its fate. Caesar's death plunged Rome into another round of civil wars as his supporters and his enemies vied for control. The final phase of the Republic's collapse saw the rise of Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, and Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal lieutenant. Together with Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, they formed the Second Triumvirate, a more formal alliance than the first. But like its predecessor, it was fraught with tension. The Triumvirate defeated Caesar's assassins at the Battle of Philippi in 42 BC, but the alliance soon fell apart. Antony, allied with the Egyptian queen Cleopatra, clashed with Octavian in a struggle for supremacy. The conflict culminated in the Battle of Actium in 31 BC, where Octavian's forces defeated Antony and Cleopatra. Both lovers would later commit suicide, and Egypt became a Roman province. In 27 BC, Octavian was granted the title Augustus, marking the beginning of the Roman Empire. The Republic was dead, but its legacy would endure. The Roman Empire would go on to dominate the Mediterranean world for centuries, but it would never forget the lessons of its turbulent past. The fall of the Roman Republic was not just the end of a political system. It was the end of an era. It was a story of ambition and betrayal, of ideals corrupted by power, and of a system that could not withstand the pressures of its own success. The Republic's collapse gave rise to the empire, but it also left a warning for future generations that even the greatest of civilizations can fall when the balance of power is lost. In 27 BC, Octavian, now known as Augustus, became the first Roman emperor, marking the beginning of a new era in Roman history. This was the start of the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, a period of relative stability and prosperity that would last for more than 2 centuries. Under Augustus and his successors, the Roman Empire reached the height of its power and influence, stretching from the misty highlands of Britain to the sun-baked deserts of Egypt, from the Atlantic coast of Spain to the fertile plains of Mesopotamia. It was an empire built on conquest, but also on innovation, governance, and cultural exchange. Augustus was more than just Rome's first emperor. He was the architect of the imperial system. After decades of civil war, he understood that the Roman people longed for peace and stability. He presented himself not as a king or dictator, but as the first citizen, princeps, a humble servant of the state. But behind this modest facade was a shrewd politician who consolidated power in ways that would shape the empire for centuries. Augustus reformed the Roman government, creating a professional civil service to manage the empire's vast territories. He rebuilt Rome, boasting that he had found a city of brick and left it a city of marble. He commissioned grand public works, from aqueducts to temples, and promoted a cultural renaissance that celebrated Roman values and traditions. Under his rule, the empire enjoyed unprecedented peace and prosperity, a stark contrast to the chaos of the late Republic. Augustus's successors, known as the Julio-Claudian emperors, inherited an empire at peace, but also a system fraught with contradictions. The emperors wielded immense power, but their legitimacy often depended on the support of the army, the Senate, and the people. This delicate balance led to both triumphs and scandals. Tiberius Claudius, Augustus's stepson and successor, was a capable but reclusive ruler who spent his later years on the island of Capri, leaving the empire in the hands of ambitious advisors. Caligula, his successor, began his reign with promise, but descended into tyranny and madness, earning a reputation for extravagance and cruelty. Claudius, often underestimated due to his physical disabilities, proved to be an effective administrator, expanding the empire to include Britain. And then there was Nero, the last of the Julio-Claudians, whose reign was marked by artistic ambition, political intrigue, and the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD. Nero's excesses and erratic behavior ultimately led to his downfall, plunging the empire into a brief period of civil war known as the Year of the Four Emperors, 69 AD. The chaos of 69 AD ended with the rise of Vespasian, the founder of the Flavian dynasty. A practical and disciplined leader, Vespasian restored stability to the empire and replenished its finances. He began construction of the Colosseum, Rome's iconic amphitheater, which would become a symbol of imperial power and entertainment. His sons, Titus and Domitian, continued his work, though Domitian's authoritarian rule eventually led to his assassination. The 2nd century AD is often regarded as the golden age of the Roman Empire, thanks to the rule of the 5 good emperors: Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, and Marcus Aurelius. These emperors were chosen not by birthright, but by merit, and their reigns were marked by wise governance, military success, and cultural flourishing. Trajan expanded the empire to its greatest extent, conquering Dacia, modern-day Romania, and parts of Mesopotamia. Hadrian, his successor, focused on consolidating the empire's borders, building the famous Hadrian's Wall in Britain, and promoting cultural unity. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, ruled with wisdom and compassion, though his reign was marred by wars and plagues. The Pax Romana was more than just an absence of war. It was a time of remarkable achievement. The empire's vast network of roads and aqueducts connected its provinces, facilitating trade, communication, and cultural exchange. Roman law provided a framework for justice and governance, while Roman engineering produced marvels like the Pantheon and the Pont du Gard aqueduct. But the Pax Romana was not without its challenges. The empire's sheer size made it difficult to govern, and its reliance on slavery and conquest created economic and social inequalities. The Roman legions, once invincible, began to face growing threats from barbarian tribes and rival powers like Parthia. The Pax Romana left an indelible mark on the world. It was a time when Rome's influence extended far beyond its borders, shaping the cultures, languages, and institutions of Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. The Roman Empire became a model of civilization, a testament to what could be achieved through unity, innovation, and ambition. But the Pax Romana was also a reminder of the fragility of power. The peace and prosperity of the 2nd century AD would not last forever. As the empire entered the 3rd century, it would face new challenges: economic crises, barbarian invasions, and internal strife that would test its resilience and ultimately lead to its decline. The 3rd century AD marked the beginning of the end for the Roman Empire. What had once been a sprawling, unified civilization stretching from Britain to Mesopotamia began to fracture under the weight of internal strife, external threats, and economic collapse. This period, often referred to as the crisis of the 3rd century, was a time of chaos and transformation that would ultimately lead to the fall of the Western Roman Empire and the survival of the Eastern Empire as the Byzantine Empire. The crisis of the 3rd century was a perfect storm of political, economic, and military challenges. The empire was plagued by a series of weak and short-lived emperors, many of whom were installed by the army and just as quickly overthrown. Between 235 and 284 AD, Rome saw more than 20 emperors, most of whom met violent ends. This period of instability, known as the Barracks Emperors, undermined the authority of the central government and left the empire vulnerable to external threats. At the same time, the empire faced growing pressure from barbarian tribes on its borders. The Goths, Franks, Alemanni, and other groups launched raids deep into Roman territory, exploiting the empire's weakened defenses. In the east, the Sassanid Empire of Persia emerged as a formidable rival, challenging Rome's dominance in the region. Economic troubles further compounded the crisis. The empire's vast size made it difficult to administer, and the cost of maintaining the army and defending the borders drained the treasury. To meet these expenses, emperors debased the currency, leading to rampant inflation and a loss of confidence in the Roman economy. Trade declined, cities shrank, and the once thriving Roman economy began to stagnate. In 284 AD, the Emperor Diocletian came to power, determined to restore order to the empire. He introduced a series of sweeping reforms, including the division of the empire into 2 halves, the Eastern Roman Empire and the Western Roman Empire, each ruled by an emperor, Augustus, and a junior co-emperor, Caesar. This system, known as the Tetrarchy, was designed to improve governance and ensure a smooth succession. Diocletian also reformed the tax system, reorganized the military, and attempted to stabilize the economy by issuing new coinage and fixing prices. His reforms brought a measure of stability to the empire, but they also marked a shift away from the traditional Roman system of governance. The emperor was no longer the first citizen, but an autocratic ruler, distant and unapproachable. Diocletian's successor, Constantine the Great, is perhaps best known for his conversion to Christianity and the founding of Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul, as the new capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. Constantine's reign marked a turning point in Roman history. In 313 AD, he issued the Edict of Milan, which granted religious tolerance to Christians and ended centuries of persecution. By the end of the 4th century, Christianity had become the dominant religion of the empire, transforming Roman culture and society. Constantine's decision to establish a new capital in the east reflected the growing importance of the Eastern Empire, which was wealthier and more stable than the West. Constantinople, strategically located at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, would become the heart of the Byzantine Empire and a bastion of Roman culture for centuries to come. Despite these reforms, The Western Roman Empire continued to decline. The 4th and 5th centuries saw a series of barbarian invasions that pushed the empire to the brink. In 410 AD, the Visigoths, led by their king Alaric, sacked Rome, a shocking event that sent ripples of fear throughout the empire. Although Rome was no longer the capital, it remained a powerful symbol of Roman power and civilization. Its fall was a stark reminder of the empire's vulnerability. The final blow came in 476 AD when the Germanic chieftain Odoacer deposed the last Western Roman emperor, Romulus Augustus. This event is often cited as the end of the Western Roman Empire, though in reality the empire had been in decline for decades. The Western Empire fragmented into a patchwork of barbarian kingdoms, while the Eastern Empire, centered on Constantinople, continued to thrive. The fall of the Western Roman Empire marked the end of an era, but it was not the end of Rome's legacy. The Eastern Roman Empire, or Byzantine Empire, would survive for another 1,000 years, preserving Roman law, culture, and traditions. In the West, the legacy of Rome lived on in the languages, laws, and institutions of Europe. The Roman Catholic Church, which emerged as a dominant force in the medieval world, carried forward the traditions of Roman administration and culture. The fall of Rome also left a cautionary tale for future generations. It was a reminder that even the greatest of civilizations are not immune to decline, and that the forces of internal decay and external pressure can bring down even the most powerful empires. The Roman Empire may have fallen, but its legacy endures in ways that continue to shape our world today. From the languages we speak to the laws we follow, from the architecture that surrounds us to the political systems we live under, the influence of Rome is everywhere. It is a legacy that stretches across centuries and continents, a testament to the enduring power of an empire that once ruled the known world. One of Rome's most enduring contributions is its legal system. Roman law, codified in texts like the 12 Tables and later the Corpus Juris Civilis, body of civil law under Emperor Justinian, laid the foundation for modern legal systems around the world. Concepts such as innocent until proven guilty, equality before the law, and the right to a fair trial can all be traced back to Roman jurisprudence. Even today, the principles of Roman law underpin the legal systems of many countries, particularly in Europe and the Americas. Rome's political legacy is equally profound. The idea of a republic, where power resides in elected representatives rather than a monarch, was a revolutionary concept that has inspired countless governments, including the United States. The Roman Senate, with its checks and balances, served as a model for modern democratic institutions. While the Roman Republic ultimately gave way to imperial rule, its ideals of liberty, citizenship, and civic duty continue to resonate. The Latin language, the tongue of the Romans, has left an indelible mark on the world. Although Latin is no longer spoken as a living language, it lives on in the Romance languages, Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Romanian, that evolved from it. Even English, a Germanic language, owes a significant portion of its vocabulary to Latin, particularly in the realms of law, science, and academia. Roman literature, too, has stood the test of time. The works of poets like Virgil, Ovid, and Horace, historians like Tacitus and Livy, and philosophers like Seneca and Marcus Aurelius continue to be studied and admired. These writings not only provide a window into the Roman world, but also explore universal themes: love, power, morality, and the human condition that remain relevant today. The Romans were master builders, and their engineering feats continue to inspire awe. The Colosseum, the Pantheon, and the aqueducts of Rome are not just relics of the past, they are enduring symbols of Roman ingenuity and ambition. Roman engineering principles, such as the use of arches, domes, and concrete, have influenced architecture for centuries. The Roman road network, which stretched over 250,000 miles, facilitated trade, communication, and military movement, laying the groundwork for modern infrastructure. Even in our daily lives, we encounter Roman innovations. The calendar we use today is a modified version of the Julian calendar, introduced by Julius Caesar. The concept of urban planning, with its grid layouts and public spaces, owes much to Roman cities like Pompeii and Timgad. Perhaps one of Rome's most profound legacies is its role in the spread of Christianity. What began as a small sect in the eastern provinces of the empire became the dominant religion of Europe, thanks in part to the conversion of Emperor Constantine and the subsequent adoption of Christianity as the state religion under Theodosius III. The Roman Catholic Church, with its hierarchy and rituals, preserved Roman administrative practices and Latin as the language of scholarship and liturgy during the Middle Ages. The fusion of Roman and Christian traditions shaped the cultural and spiritual landscape of Europe, influencing art, literature, and philosophy for centuries. The Vatican, with its Renaissance art and architecture, stands as a testament to this enduring legacy. But Rome's legacy is not just one of achievement, it is also a cautionary tale. The rise and fall of the Roman Empire offer lessons about the dangers of overexpansion, the fragility of political systems, and the consequences of social and economic inequality. Rome's decline reminds us that even the greatest civilizations are not immune to collapse, and that the pursuit of power and glory can come at a cost. At the same time, Rome's enduring influence is a testament to the resilience of its ideas and institutions. The Roman Empire may have fallen, but its legacy lives on in the languages we speak, the laws we follow, and the cultures we inhabit. It is a reminder that the past is never truly gone. It is woven into the fabric of our present, shaping who we are and who we might become. In the end, the story of Rome is more than just a history lesson. It is a reflection of humanity itself. It is a story of ambition and achievement, of triumph and tragedy, of the rise and fall of empires. It is a story that reminds us of the power of ideas, the importance of innovation, and the enduring impact of a civilization that once ruled the world. As we walk through the ruins of the Roman Forum, gaze up at the arches of the Colosseum, or marvel at the precision of Roman roads, we are not just looking at the past, we are seeing on the foundations of our own world. The legacy of Rome is not just a chapter in a history book, it is a living, breathing part of who we are. And as long as we continue to build, to govern, to create, and to dream, the spirit of Rome will live on.